My name is Casey O'Ryan.
My name is John O'Neill, and our coach and teacher is Mr. Richard Clark.
Well, again, good afternoon. The question we're going to take up today for Unit 3 is as follows. The Emancipation Proclamation is said to be perhaps the greatest document of social reform in American history. Do you agree or disagree with that assessment, and why? On what constitutional grounds did Lincoln issue the Emancipation Proclamation? In signing the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln wiped out property worth millions. Did Lincoln violate the Takings Clause of the Fifth Amendment, or was the Emancipation Proclamation justified by the Constitution, which empowers Congress to make rules concerning captures on land and water? And that's in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. Please begin.
In The Duty of a Statesman, William Lee Miller contended President Lincoln's role in ending slavery was a moral accomplishment that required that he not admit it was such. The Emancipation Proclamation was a turning point in the fight against slavery. However, to be justifiable, the document was issued out of practical rather than moral reasons. Thus, the proclamation had limited success in freeing slaves, but succeeded in redefining the Civil War and winning the conflict for the Union.
Despite the intent of the Emancipation Proclamation to free an entire class of people, its limited effectiveness leads us to disagree with the claim that it is the greatest document of social reform in American history. As a military order, the proclamation applied only to areas of rebellion and not to border states. This meant that very few slaves were freed by the country, prompting historian Lonnie Bunch to call it the most misunderstood document of social reform in American history.
The truly great American documents of social rectification had larger impacts. Lincoln acknowledged this when he found that the proclamation fell far short of the 13th Amendment. Other documents, like the Seneca Falls Declaration, expanded the original social reforms of the Declaration of Independence to include women and minorities. Contemporary examples of social reform demonstrate the potential impact that such documents can have. The Lilly Ledbetter Act made strides towards giving women equal pay for equal work, while the consequences of the 1999 vote passed the nation were far-reaching enough to elicit comparisons of Sinclair's The Junkies.
In his diary, Secretary of the Navy William Wells recounted Lincoln's conclusion that we must free the slaves or be ourselves doomed. While Lincoln previously deemed such a measure unconstitutional, he now embraced it as a necessary means of saving the Union. To justify this action, Lincoln rooted the proclamation in his powers as Commander-in-Chief by describing it as an act of justice warranted by military necessity.
Justification for the order was also found in Lincoln's powers as to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, allowing Lincoln to enforce legislation like the 1861 and 1862 Confiscation Acts. Furthermore, the proclamation marked a turning point in the international support for the Union because it redefined the conflict in terms of slavery. The Supreme Court vindicated Lincoln's proclamation in the 1952 Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company decision, when it differentiated between his actions as Commander-in-Chief and President Harry Truman's unconstitutional order to nationalize the steel industry.
Despite freeing few slaves, the Emancipation Proclamation still had significant repercussions for American constitutionalists. Many saw the uncompensated taking of property by the president a violation of the Fifth Amendment's Takings Clause, or, in the opinion of R.R. Palmer, an annihilation of individual property rights without parallel in the history of the Western world. However, prior to the proclamation, a number of offers to compensate slave owners were made. The proclamation itself even stated that those who remain loyal to the Union shall be compensated for all losses, including slaves.
The Constitution's Captures Clause further justified the proclamation in that it allowed Congress to make rules concerning captures on land and water. Since the Confiscation Act and subsequent proclamation were wartime measures, the uncompensated taking of rebel property was justifiable under this clause.
The rejection of the Constitution by the Confederate States also meant that the Fifth Amendment no longer applied to them. This was reflected by the President's statement that such principles apply only in this country and not to areas in rebellion. The true idealism of the Emancipation Proclamation would not be fully revealed until the permanent death of slavery at the hands of the 13th Amendment and the assurance of a new birth of freedom that was provided. Thank you.
why did President Lincoln think that the 13th Amendment was necessary to secure the Emancipation Proclamation?
Well, Lincoln himself remarked in a New York Times article that he was not even sure about the legality of the measure. The 13th Amendment really completed the moral reasons behind the Emancipation Proclamation. They essentially gave it a constitutional okay.
Furthermore, Lincoln knew very well that if he dropped the issue of slavery and left it at the Emancipation Proclamation, slavery would essentially continue as it had previously before the war. Because the Emancipation Proclamation was a military measure, its effectiveness would essentially cease to exist after the war was finished. As a result, Lincoln felt that he needed a far more permanent piece of legislation in place to protect the rights of Americans, and the 13th Amendment was that piece of legislation.
We're told that Lincoln actually delayed issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. Why did he do so? And do you think he was well advised or ill advised in doing that?
Well, he was actually told by Secretary of State Seward to wait until after the tide of the war itself had turned. If he had issued the proclamation before that happened with the Battle of Antietam, then it might have been seen as an act of desperation.
In addition, in a recent essay written by historian R.R. Palmer, it was noted that it seems as though the Emancipation Proclamation was written as really a further enforcement of the Confiscation Acts. Indeed, Lincoln wrote it just a few weeks after the Second Confiscation Act had been passed and put into place.
Was Lincoln justified in using presidential power as commander-in-chief to issue this proclamation?
Yes, he was.
Was he or was he not?
Yes, he was.
Tell me why.
Outlined in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, he is the commander-in-chief. Therefore, he has all power over the military forces.
Also, in Article 4, Section 4, his duty to protect the country from domestic violence. So he needed to do this in order to uphold that clause.
You mentioned in your opening statement that this was a different situation than was involved in the Georgetown sheet Steel versus Sawyer. Why was the president's authority limited there, where you think it's not limited as it involved President Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation?
Absolutely. Essentially, the differentiation that the court made stemmed around the necessity for the action to take place. Because in the case of Abraham Lincoln, emancipation was a very necessary action to take for the war itself. And because national security had an immediate threat taking place, his actions were placed above those of Harry Truman, who was really acting as before any conflict or any real immediate threat had taken place.
Additionally, Abraham Lincoln almost set precedent for future presidents in regards to their military power and other powers granted to them. So, with Abraham Lincoln,
Well, Secretary of the War Edwin Stanton described how the South really had an unprecedented advantage with that slavery backbone that they possessed. So by stripping them of that backbone, the North really allowed for that advantage to be taken away, and for the slaves basically the Southern whites would basically have to take over the slaves' jobs.
Beyond that, do you think the Emancipation Proclamation changed at all the meaning and purpose of the war?
Absolutely. The Emancipation Proclamation was meant to do that very thing. After the Battle of Antietam, Lincoln realized that he needed a way to garner not only international support, but also a way to really rally the troops on the side of the Union. And that's exactly what the Emancipation Proclamation did. It really shifted this war that had been previously about just saving the Union and keeping us together into a war about the morality of slavery and about maintaining the natural rights of human beings.
additionally, with the Emancipation Proclamation, slaves could be thought of as contraband in war. General Benjamin Butler was stationed in Virginia at Fort Monroe, and he was very a pro-slavery man. But with the realities of war and some African Americans in the military, he had a change of heart and therefore was for universal emancipation.
Can you talk with me a little bit more? I think I heard you say that yes, you think that Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 did justify what Lincoln did. Yet, I would ask you, whose power is that to go under the Constitution?
Well, it absolutely belongs to Congress, and I would actually differ with the opinions of my colleagues in that respect. Because Article 1 really grants all of these powers to Congress in wartime, and President Lincoln actually didn't really ask Congress at all before he took any of these actions. It's not his power, and he was acting unconstitutionally. In fact, in the case of Ex parte Merryman, the Supreme Court actually very explicitly said that that Lincoln was acting outside of the bounds of the Constitution. Lincoln just chose to ignore that particular rule.
An early case in American history was Martin v. Mott, which occurred when James Madison called out troops to put down an insurrection. Now, the interesting thing about this case is that he was basically using the congressional ability to call forth an army. Now, the court ruled that he could do this. He could do this because it was supported by the acts of Congress. So this has become a very important precedent for Lincoln's later actions, which were supported by congressional.
Well, thank you. Very nice job. Well, in terms of general comments, I thought you did a very nice job in terms of being directly responsive to our follow-up questions and that portion of the report. You did a nice job of all contributing on those follow-up questions and the balance was work. I liked the reference to General Stevens Butler, which I've not heard of in our other presentations today. And the one thing that I thought was a little intention is at one point you talked about the President's actions being consistent with the Compensation Act. Then you also at one point said that you thought the President had perhaps acted beyond his powers. And you might think about, there's one follow-up question that we asked about the 13th Amendment. And remember, the 13th Amendment, among other things, not only approved slavery, but gave Congress expressly the power to legislate, something that Dred Scott had said Congress did not have. So beyond freeing the slaves, it was important that we recognize. But all in all, I thought it was a very nice job.
I appreciate the fact that you brought up Mr. Madison and used his actions as a precedent for Lincoln. Enjoyed the presentation.
Actually, let me tell you that anytime that I learn something I did not already know, I think that's very good, right? And, I'm very much eager to find out this recent essay by R.R. Palmer. I'm not familiar with that, so I may ask you later where that is, okay? And also, I'm not familiar with Martin versus Mott, and so I thank you again, right, for helping educate me about those things. I appreciated your bringing up the Youngstown case and trying to take that into comparison with what Lincoln did, comparing it to what Harry Truman did. And I also appreciated your response. You disagreed with the opening statement that you didn't think the Emancipation was the greatest document of social reform, and you took us to some others, the Seneca Falls Declaration of Sentiments and Resolve, the Lilly Ledbetter Act. We haven't heard that one today, right? But I think about that and well, it's pretty good, okay? I heard a mention of Upton Sinclair in the Jungle, and I wasn't exactly sure what that connection was, but I think it was good, all right? So I enjoyed your presentation very much. And the other thing that I thought you did, you know, once in a while, we all have those moments where, I don't know, our brain just leaves us, and it's always nice when someone comes to your rescue, right? And we all have those moments. I'm having them a lot these days. I'm much older than you are, okay? But anyway, that's always good when you do that. It's a nice thing to see. So thank you very much.
Good job. Casey, maybe that opening or going in.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. You come up to the front of the room. Thank you for your art. Appreciate it.
straight to the states.
Teaching college professors.
That was history. Curriculum history. Nothing current.
Stacy, freaking don't know the answer.
Dave's ready to go.
Hey,
Way to set yourself up.
hey, you were good. Next judges are ready, so.
I was gonna have you like yell at the judge.
Nice job.
Hey, make sure we get that
Hey,
volume.
close out, huh?
Volume.
Jack. What? Wow, Jack.
Are you guys only 3?
Yes. Let's, and then, hey, then center it up, center it up, center it up. You guys get a lot of breathing room up there, so enjoy it. I hope this Paps was with that.
Big Al.